How's it going, guys? I'm Connor from Running Warehouse, and we're back with another episode of the Running Warehouse Connection. Now, we've been off for a little bit, but we're back. We're bringing some great athletes, and we've seen a lot of great athletes over the past couple months, but there's one that kind of has a special place in our heart. She's one of the best ultramarathoners in the world. She's a fan favorite. She's a Running Warehouse favorite. We've got Courtney Dauwalter. Courtney, how does it feel to be back on the Connection?
Oh, so good. You're too nice. Thanks for letting me come back. It's cool to see you again.
Yeah,
virtually connecting.
We are virtually connected. The fans have been asking nonstop, bring Courtney back, so we had to do it. I think, it hasn't been that long since we talked last, but really, so much has happened. I know you've been running a lot. There's been a record attempt that I want to dive into, but give us a little update. What's new with you and your training?
Yeah, running a lot. This summer was really fun with no races to just have kind of free reign over doing whatever mountains and however many hours and just kind of, adventuring, which was a highlight of kind of a weird, unfortunate year for sure. So it's been a cool summer.
Yeah, I've also been out there running a lot, doing some trails that maybe I haven't done before. You talk about adventuring, and you can't help but think about your Colorado Trail record. I heard about this a couple months ago, and it's about 500 miles. There's 90,000 feet of elevation. How did you get the inspiration for this, and what is the record that you were going after?
So the Colorado Trail is basically a single track trail from Durango to Denver. You're right, it's about 490 miles, 90,000 feet of climbing. You go through all these, forest areas and mountain ranges, and it's just stunning terrain. So for me, I think the seed started growing, and I knew eventually I wanted to try it after I finished the MOAB 240 a few years ago and realized that 240 miles is possible. So what would be the next natural thing to test out and to try? And 500 sounded like a good answer to that question. So knowing that there was this 500-mile trail in Colorado where I live that's just absolutely beautiful was, brewing for me for a few years. And when will I get the opportunity to try this, and what will 500 miles feel like? And so this year, to have it shake out where I got to attempt it was really fun. The current record is Brian Williams' 8 days and 30 minutes, which is a stout time for a trail like that, where, it's at altitude for a really long time. So I'm impressed by his record, and I'm excited to try to go for it again sometime.
Yeah, and so it all started with MOAB, which is around 200 miles, and in your head you're thinking, might as well over double that, and that's the next step. So I see how your mind's thinking. Crazy.
Yeah, a little glimpse in there.
Well, I imagine there is a lot of planning that goes into this. You talk about 8 days, give or take, was the record. What goes into in terms of fueling, in terms of sleep, in terms of prepping out the trail you're going to go? What went into this whole preparation for this event?
It was huge. It's no joke to try and plan the logistics for 490 miles of running. So I knew I wanted to do it supported, which means you can have crew and you can have pacers, and you can set up your aid stations and have all this food and gear ready for you. So that was part of my plan from the get-go, is I wanted to share this experience with people and to have my friends and family be able to be a part of it all. So figuring out who could take off for a week of work and come spend it on the Colorado Trail with me was step one. And then it was a lot of, figuring out how to get to those different places. And when you're planning an FKT, which this was my very first attempt at a fastest known time, you can do whatever you want. So like our crew could go anywhere, like the aid stations could be whatever intersections of road and trail that we thought were really convenient, unlike a race where, you know, there's predetermined aid stations. And so having all of that choice makes it really awesome, and the everything can be pretty flexible, but it also makes it so you have to make all these extra choices.
Yeah, and you talk about the crew versus like a non-crewed, and there's obviously benefits of having the crew. Who did you end up choosing for your crew? How many were there? And how were they like following you around from point to point?
We had a few different vehicles because there's a few spots where it gets tricky, especially in the San Juan area where the mountains are just huge and the roads are really rough and everything's kind of remote. So we had an RV that had like our main traveling crew in it, and that was my husband and then a few friends who crewed both the 200-mile races that I've done, and then a guy from my physical therapist team who came along to help like basically stretch me and, you know, manage any body issues as they came up. So that was the traveling RV. And then there were a few other vehicles with some different support that were able to bop into different spots.
Yeah, and so you've got a crew. You're tracking this along the way. Are you using GPS, and are you kind of are you trying to figure out where you are compared to the record holder, or are you kind of taking it day by day at your own pace?
We were using GPS. I had a tracker on the whole time, so my crew could kind of see where I was, and I had my Suunto watch, which, you know, could tell me basics about what was going on. But mostly for me, I was just running. So we didn't have a plan of where I would get to every day or where I would stop and sleep. We wanted to leave it really open-ended to see what was possible. If you don't restrict anything and you just kind of go with it and listen to your body, then when do you get to the finish line? So that was our idea, which I didn't get to the finish line. So we don't know if that worked, but yeah, we were just kind of rolling with it. And I honestly wasn't watching the mileage after probably the first like 20 miles. I did those first 20 miles by myself to kind of like, I don't know, set my mind on this task at hand and enjoy the peace for 20 miles and just kind of like sink into the running motion and that routine that was going to be happening. And then after that, I had a pacer with me for the rest of the 290 miles that I did make it. So after that first 20 miles, I stopped looking, and it was either daytime or nighttime, and that was the only thing I really knew. I didn't know when we were at certain mileage points. I didn't know what day it was necessarily. I was just running.
Wow.
Easy.
That's insane. And I mean, this really was such a long pursuit, and you said you have no predetermined, you know, sleep schedule. What was your sleep looking like? Like, how much were you getting per day?
I didn't sleep for the first 130-ish miles. So that was over a day. We just decided that based on what we had learned in the 200-mile races that I had done, I never got sleepy on that first night during those. And so we were like, let's try and apply that here and just see how it works. So after that first 130 miles, then I was planning to take some more like substantial 2 or 3 hour naps every once in a while. But I had this like coughing and wheezing that started pretty early on in my attempt, where every time I laid down, it just like I laid there coughing and wheezing and not, you know, able to actually rest. So the sleep game was pretty unsuccessful in the RV. We had bigger plans for how that would work, but that's just how it rolls sometimes. And otherwise, I would just sleep out on the trail for a minute or 3 minutes, or sometimes I think I would be laying down and I'd say like 6 minutes would maybe be the most I'd ask for ever. But I took a lot of trail naps out there.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, I know a couple minutes can sometimes feel like forever when you're out there and you're ready to get on because you don't want to waste any time, but still that's insane. And it sounds like there were some little signs early on. You talk about the wheezing, but it didn't affect you enough to stop. But around 300 miles, it sounded like that was kind of the point where you couldn't go any farther. What happened, and what were you thinking in your head at that point?
Yeah, I got to 309 miles, and as I was coming into that aid station, my crew was all there. It was a really easy road access spot, so the RV was there. In my head, I was thinking I was going to grab some food and go. So like stopping wasn't really, that wasn't in my idea plan, but my crew suggested I sleep. And so I was like, all right, we'll sleep and then we'll get moving on the trail in a few hours. Let's try sleeping again. And when I laid down to sleep, my coughing and wheezing had just gotten so much worse. And so my crew, which had been gradually getting more concerned about this coughing and wheezing, and they had been calling people who might know what was going on. They had been looking on the internet for like, what are these maybe symptoms of? Should we be super worried, or is this just part of the game? They reached a point where they were like, this is too much. We got to go get it checked out. And so they told me that we were going to go to the hospital, which was just down the road from that spot. It was really convenient there. And so after I got some information from them about why now, like this coughing and wheezing has been happening for days, what's the panic now? They justified it, and then we got in a car and we drove to the hospital. But even on the way to the hospital, I was thinking that I would tell the doctor what I was doing. Like, I'm out here running for days, here's what's happening for me. And he would just say, well, of course that's happening. You can get back on the trail. That's just a normal symptom of running for 309 miles. So I hadn't fully accepted that it was the end until, they admitted me, and I had IVs and oxygen, and then it became pretty clear.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily at this point know what the issue is. You know something's wrong, but once you got in there, you get the IVs. What was the final diagnosis? What was the issue?
They finally, after tons of testing and imaging and stuff, they diagnosed it as acute bronchitis. Basically, there was a lot of inflammation in my lungs, and my lungs just weren't getting in oxygen. So I actually remember sitting on the bed in the ER right when I got there, and I was explaining, my explanation that was going to get me back on the trail of how that I was coughing and wheezing. And I remember that I could barely like make sentences because I couldn't breathe. So like I couldn't really talk and string together these thoughts for him. So it had gotten where it was a not emergency situation yet, but it was very good that we made it and went to the ER when we did.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like had your crew not kind of guided you in that direction, you were willing to kind of keep pushing through and keep going further. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, in my head, it was just part of it. I was like, well, I'm wheezing and coughing. That's the hand we were dealt this time. We're going to, deal with it because that's what you do in an ultra. So I was planning to take it all the way to Denver. But the oxygen levels that I had, the doctor was like, you wouldn't have made it to Denver. Like, it wasn't good.
Yeah. I mean, do you think part of that, I imagine part of it had to do with elevation, but what do you think the causes were of that? And do you think that maybe a second attempt you would be able to kind of come back and conquer the issues you faced this first time?
It's hard to say. I mean, for sure, I would hope so, that this was all, a great learning experience, and I can take that information and apply it to a next attempt. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what might have caused it and caused it to be so severe this time. It could have been, the air, it could have been dust, or it could have been something already brewing in my lungs that then just got really irritated when I asked it to run for that long. So I'm not positive exactly what caused it, but I'm feeling much better now. Recovery went really well, so I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, so how long after this attempt did it take to recover, and did you do anything in particular? Did you just take some time off, or what was that whole process like?
Yeah, I was admitted in the hospital, so once I was released from there, my oxygen levels were back to like healthy, normal level. So that was helpful to just start off on the right foot right away afterwards. And then I had about a week of where my lungs I was coughing quite a bit, and I just felt like my lungs weren't really fully there yet. But after that first week out of the hospital, then the rebuild to getting in some short jogs and starting to build back up in that way was, pretty uneventful. Like, everything was feeling good. My legs were feeling great after the attempt. And so just being patient with it all and not going too soon was important.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you're feeling better. And I'm sure you've kind of spent some time to reflect on the whole experience. Looking back now, is there anything that you think you would have done differently? And do you think you learned anything from this whole experience?
Yeah, for sure. We learned a lot from this experience. I mean, the crewing and the running of this long of a trail is, it's a lot. So I think my husband, who is like the main crew guy, learned a ton for just the logistics of it. And he was barely sleeping either. So kind of figuring out that game of how to juggle it all. And then for me, it was, it really lit the spark for me of wondering what it would feel like to get all the way to Denver. So I'm pumped that I went 309 miles and that I got to do that first part of the Colorado Trail and experience that many days of it. And now I'm just curious about what it would be like to put it together all the way in. So I'm excited that it happened the way it did, because I think the fire's a little bit brighter.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine we'll probably see you do this again at some point. You've started it. I imagine you'd probably want to give it another go, but I guess you've done now half of it, or actually more than half of it, and right around 223 miles. I know this trail is pretty straightforward, but at 223 there's a part where the trail kind of goes in two directions. Can you talk about which way you went and why you did that, and I guess would you do that same route again?
That's a great question. You did your research.
I did.
Yeah, so it's right around Monarch Pass, which is outside Salida, Colorado, and it's called the Collegiate Loop. The original Colorado Trail went on the east side, which kind of rolls along the shoulder of these peaks, and it's really beautiful forest terrain. And then the west side, Collegiate West, they finished, I think, a handful of years ago, and it is like a little bit higher elevation in general, a little more climbing, and just a little more distance on that west side. So I chose Collegiate West because a few reasons, I guess. I was told it was more beautiful and gnarly, and it seemed like if I was going to do the Colorado Trail, I wanted the beautiful and gnarly. And also Brian's record was set on that Collegiate West side. So I wanted to try and follow the path that he took when he set his record, so that I could, see how I stacked up next to his at the end. And then they rejoined at Twin Lakes, just south of Leadville, which I had finished Collegiate West and gotten to Twin Lakes, and that was mile 309, where then I went to the hospital.
Wow. So yeah, not too much longer after that, you did have to kind of call it quits. But what you talk about the elevation there and some of the ups and downs. What is the terrain like? Because was this probably one of the hardest parts of the trek?
The Collegiate West section?
Yeah.
For me, it was for sure. I think I was so wrecked at that point. Like, I hadn't slept in so long because I was in this vicious cycle of being unable to sleep. And so then, pushing forward and it just being this kind of downward trend. So I was really tired. And then a ton of that section I did in the night. And I love night running, but in the state I was in, everything just felt kind of harder in the nighttime. So it's a ton of climbing and you're above tree line. I think you spend a ton of time at 12,000 feet on that Collegiate West loop. So it was hard. I did a lot of trail napping back there because it was the only way to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
But man, yeah, it was so beautiful. And it's pretty rugged, but at the same time, the trails they've established are so amazing. And to think, you're out in these places that are so far away from anything that people were building those. Like, it was volunteers primarily who built this Colorado Trail, and the places they went, and then the amazing trail that they put together is pretty special.
Wow. And you talk about kind of these long days, long nights, and I know in the past we've talked about some of the hallucinations you've had out on the trail, and I know you're known for a couple different pretty prominent hallucinations. Did you have any on this trek? And if you did, what was the craziest?
I was definitely hallucinating on this one. The two that stand out for me are a circle of giant teddy bears hugging, like off in the forest, which looked super cozy. And then it was nighttime and I bent over and I was dripping sweat off my forehead, but the sweat was made of pomegranate seeds and they were just falling on the ground in front of my feet, which was really strange. I think though the weirdest thing that I experienced that I hadn't experienced before is that I got stuck in this deja vu world for about 24 hours. Every single thing that I experienced out there, I was certain that I had already done. Like, I would come around the corner on the trail and I already knew what the terrain was going to look like. I've never been anywhere near this section of the trail. So like, none of it I had seen before, but I kept saying to my pacers, like, I've been here before. We've done this already. Or like, I was brought coffee out onto the trail, and I was certain that I had already done that exact scenario before where someone had brought me coffee in that spot on the trail. It was so crazy.
Wow. Yeah, I mean you were obviously pushing your body to the limit, and you're known to push the limits, but this is like one step further than you've ever gone. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense that you were kind of experiencing something unlike you've ever experienced before. I mean, what was your mindset like during all this? Like, do you feel like you have a pretty good memory of the whole experience, or does it seem a little foggy?
Definitely a little bit foggy, especially those last few days. And like, if you ask me to timestamp a section or tell you which section came before another section, I don't know that I would do it super accurately. But I think I have it pretty set in my head. And I was like, I had my wits about me mostly. But yeah, was definitely having some crazy things happening as well. So
yeah, I mean, that not only are you pushing the limits, but like the lack of sleep. We talked about, I think, 4 hours during the whole entire time you were out there. I mean, moving forward, what do you think the priorities are going to be set on sleep? Do you think that will be more of a focus just for something this long? It seems like that is going to be a huge part of, making it successfully through the full 8 days.
Yeah, I think that's part of the draw for me. Is I'm really intrigued by this sleep game and how you get it right for 8 days or 500 miles. So we estimate my sleep time was around 4 hours, that was less than we had hoped. Like, we weren't hoping to be that crazy, but every time I laid down, it just wasn't successful. I wasn't able to sleep. And so it was just kind of rolling with the punches and problem solving as we went. And for me, like, staying in the facts of like, okay, that's not working, so we keep going. So I think going into a next attempt, the plan would involve more sleep for sure, but I don't know what that would look like. I should probably like look into some sleep science and see what the experts say.
Right, right. I mean, that is a huge factor. And I mean, for you, I imagine you have a normal sleep cycle that you get yourself into. What is the typical nightly sleep? And during an ultra marathon, is this something you're known to do, or do you kind of just always power through?
Well, I've never done something so long. So in the 200-mile races, the plan is always to power through and to just nap if needed. And so in the 200-mile races that I've done, I did nap as needed, but kept it to pretty short power naps. Kyle Curtin, who won the Tahoe 200 the year that I ran it, he went 205 miles, and I don't remember what his finish time was, somewhere around 50 hours, and he didn't sleep 1 minute. He went the whole time running it. So I know it's possible to do that amount of time and that many miles, but then to, make that apply to 500 miles, and then to kind of figure out what you have to do on that front end to save yourself for the back end is a pretty fun puzzle.
Yeah. And an elite athlete like yourself, what is a normal sleep schedule look like day to day?
About 8 hours every night. Pretty normal sleeping.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, 8 hours, it's a good amount, but it also is crazy with the amount of miles you're doing. It would seem like you would need I hear some elite athletes 10, 12 hours, but you're also, I know you're crazy. You're always on the go, on to the next thing. So that doesn't surprise me much.
Yeah, I'm a basically an 8 hours a night and no naps. Like, I don't like napping during the day, so.
Yeah. Well, I will disagree with that philosophy. I'm definitely a napper, but everyone's a little bit different. So I respect your choice. But I guess moving forward, moving forward now, I'm sure this kind of record attempt, you did it, you learned from it, but now we got to move on to the next. What is on the goals? Do you have other races? Do you have other record attempts? What is the future looking like for your kind of race day schedule?
We'll see. It's all kind of in the air right now. Seeing how my body and lungs recovered and if my brain felt fresh again were priority number one. And then once that happened, then it was kind of starting to scheme up what this fall and early winter could look like. In Colorado, playing the weather game, so beating the snow, is important in the mountains and on those mountain routes. So we'll see what September and October bring for that. And I'm currently still signed up for Big's Backyard, which is happening mid-October in Tennessee. So we'll see if things still happen as planned for that as well.
Wow. And so with that kind of potentially in the future, does your training, are you adjusting your training at all towards that? And if so, what are you doing to kind of prepare for that unique situation of that race?
I'm not adjusting my training. Right now, I'm kind of still in the build back up. So I don't know, we're like a month out from my Colorado Trail attempt at this point. And so building back slowly has been important for me. So I'm kind of in that building phase of just testing the waters to see how everything feels. And then I think for Big's Backyard, there's nothing in particular I would do to train for it besides go into it with a nice base and then feeling as fresh as possible with the hopes of staying in it for many, many days.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this last time. I know it's always like a crowd favorite race. is there any, well, have we heard yet who is going to be some of your top competitors? And is that something that you even kind of keep track of, or are you really kind of focusing on yourself in that race?
That race is so unique because you need each other. So in order for the race to keep going, you need another person to keep going with you. So it's almost like this team atmosphere of like encouraging each other and keeping people in it, so that when you get to those really crazy mileage numbers, it feels less crazy because you're with, a handful of friends still. So I haven't looked into who's signed up for it right now, or what that's going to look like, but I know that I hope that many people would show up ready to go for 3 or 4 or 5 days, because having many people show up with that attitude makes it so we all can, rise to that challenge and see what's possible for humans.
Right. I know we talked about this last time as well, and really we don't know how far that race can go, and it really does depend on, who's right there next to you, pushing you along the way. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how that race goes, tracking you along the way. I guess moving forward past that, do you have any more of these kind of record attempt ambitions? And what do you think is the longest you'd consider to go? Because I know before we were talking 200 miles was kind of where you were at. Now we have 500 miles. What do you think the limit is for someone like you in one of these kind of record taking FKTs?
I have no idea. First, I need to get that 500-mile monkey off my back.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, can't jump too far ahead, but I mean, knowing you would jump straight from not finishing the 500 to a 700. Well, good. I guess I kind of want to go back a little bit to this Colorado Trail, because I think there were a couple other things I wanted to talk about. You said you were tracking everything with GPS. Was there anyone else documenting this experience?
Yeah, Salomon was along. They had a photographer and a filmer out on trail with me. So they got some great footage, and they'll be putting together a Salomon TV episode from it, which should be pretty awesome. I mean, just the scenery alone will be worth watching, I think. It's so beautiful out there.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, their Salomon TV things are amazing, and I know this one's with that trail is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah. Tailwind also had a photographer out there. So yeah, it was really cool to have people along to document these moments that could easily be forgotten otherwise, or like to see how bad I was hurting by the expression on my face is like a good reminder of how deep in the pain cave I was.
Well, you said Tailwind was out there with you. Was that your main nutrition of choice during the trip? What were you using to kind of fuel the whole adventure?
Tailwind in my bottles, and then Honey Stinger waffles and chews were the main things in my pack. And then I had the Salomon filter flask along. Have you tried it?
No.
Oh, it's amazing. Scooping from just any river out there, and it's just built into the top, so it doesn't require like a bunch of steps to use it. So that was the main ingredients in my pack to keep me going. And then when I would make it to an aid station where my crew was, we were basically trying like any simple carbohydrates. So mashed potatoes, pancakes, gnocchi, pierogies, ramen, the basic like, I guess, ultra fare, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you got to get the calories. And I imagine even too, sometimes you don't even want to get it down, but to kind of keep moving forward, you got to get those calories in your system.
Yeah, for sure. I think my stomach did turn one of the days. It was probably a combination of the altitude and the heat and just pushing. But then I was relying pretty heavily on the liquid calories. So tons and tons of Tailwind was going in.
Wow. Now, nutrition, big factor, but we also have the shoe aspect. And I know you are very particular about your shoes. What was the shoe of choice, and were you switching it up throughout?
Yeah, I had 3 in the rotation. So I had the S-Lab Ultra 3, the Sense Ride 3, and then the Ultra Pro. And those, I don't have a preference. I love them all and trust them all, and have done big miles in all of them. So I think I started in the S-Lab Ultra 3, and then after the first, I did 130 miles in those, and then after that first 130, then I was kind of toggling back and forth between the Sense Ride 3 and the Ultra Pro.
And I mean, those 3 are all kind of staples in the Salomon lineup. For someone who maybe doesn't know much about those, can you talk about kind of what distinguishes those 3 and why you like those shoes?
I like them because I'm comfortable in them and I trust them on any terrain. So they've done big miles with me, which I think is key when you're, choosing a shoe for a big effort like this, is that you can put it on and just not question your choice. It's on and it's good, and here we go. But the S-Lab Ultra 3, I started in because it just feels fast and comfortable. The top kind of fits like this sock, and there's good protection underfoot, but it's also super lightweight. So that was a fun shoe to start it out in. Sliding it on, it made it kind of give this like race feel to the whole thing, like, oh, we're doing something, which I think was a good addition to the feelings going on. And then the Sense Ride 3 and the Ultra Pro are they're just super comfortable. They have great cushion. They've felt good on my tired, worn out legs and feet at that point. So I liked how much room they gave my feet to be swollen, and also then how much protection they gave it as I was running.
Yeah. No, I think you kind of nailed all 3 of those, because that's like my same thoughts. S-Lab, a little faster. The Ride, like, that's such a versatile shoe. I've used that for so many different types of trails, different distances. It's one of those shoes that has fantastic value, and some of the tech in it is very similar to the high-end trail shoes. So a very underappreciated shoe, I feel like. I feel like that's really up there with some of the best shoes, even though the price point maybe might not be quite as high. And then, of course, the Ultra, yeah, another just great, highly cushioned shoe. And when you're going that far, it seems like cushioning is going to play a big factor. I mean, you talked about after the fact your legs felt pretty good, but when you're doing these long attempts, what is kind of the first thing that usually starts breaking down? Or do you feel it in your feet, your legs, like mentally? What is kind of the first thing that usually you start to be like, oop, there's a red flag here?
It really depends on the course, I think. If you're pounding them downhill a ton, then you might feel it in certain spots of your legs, or if there's been a lot of climbing or altitude, you might feel it in your lungs or somewhere else on your body. So really it's course dependent on what, triggers a little flag first for me. And this one was a unique scenario where my lungs were just flashing lights real quick. And so I don't think anything else got to get as beat up and worn down, because the lungs were really restricting how quickly I could move. Yeah. So my legs recovered really quickly afterwards, which was fun.
Oh, that's good to hear. And we talk about those 3 shoes, and I know you're very particular about your shoes. Have you been testing or trying any other shoes in your lineup recently, or has your kind of staple shoes been kind of the same over the last 6 months?
Yeah, really, the last 6 months it's been those 3, and then the Predicts on road.
Okay, so Predict, and can you talk about, because I know Salomon is a little bit newer to the road running scene, can you talk about the Predict, what you like about it, and kind of what the shoe's all about?
Yeah, the Predict is awesome. I think it just works well for my stride on roads, and it feels great for me on any distances. I wore the Predict during the 24-hour World Championships last year, So one pair of Predict shoes for 140 some miles on like tar and gravel, basically. But yeah, I love them. I think they fit really great. They also have a lineup of road shoes called the Sonic. I think there's 3 different Sonic road shoes, and they've got some great qualities as well. So I think it'll be cool to see what they come up with and how they can grow in that road running field.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Sonic line looks great. It was interesting to hear you kind of wear the Predict, and it makes sense for like a 100+ mile road race. That shoe does kind of have a really good balance of like kind of more of a high cushion feel, but also very light. So it makes sense that you chose that shoe. How often are you making it onto the roads? Is that something that you add into your lineup, a couple times a week, or is it kind of a rare occasion that you make it?
I like road running. Yeah, I don't mind it. Sometimes I'll just throw on my Sense Ride 3s and I'll head out the door and see what happens, because like you were saying, they're so versatile that I could end up on trails on those, on dirt roads, or on the bike path in town. So yeah, some days though I'll choose roads just to have maybe a more like mindless, or I might use it as a easy run day to just cruise around on roads and not have to pay attention to the terrain quite as much as on a trail.
Totally. And yeah, as you said, Sense Ride actually is a great option for that. I've done that before where, kind of that perfect road to trail type shoe. It really can do it all. So
yeah.
Great to hear about your favorite shoes. Want to kind of move this discussion on to the fan questions, that everyone sent in.
Boy.
Every time we ask about Courtney, we get a new record amount of questions sent in. So this time I was scrolling through, I picked some of the favorites. Question number 1, we've got Courtney, what is your race preference? Do you prefer long uphill grinds or steep downhill descents? If you have a kind of a preference between the two.
If I have to choose between those two, I'm choosing the long uphill grind for sure.
And why is that? Is that kind of your strength, or is that just something that you prefer to do?
I love it. I think, yeah, on those uphill grinds, you can just kind of settle into a rhythm, like kind of downshift your engine a little bit and just roll with it. I think it's pretty fun to chug along up a hill like that.
On your Colorado Trail trek, was it mostly uphill, or was there like a pretty good up and down? What was the terrain like there?
Yeah, huge variety. So a lot of up and over passes. So you do like a really long climb up to a pass between 2 peaks, and then you drop down the other side, roll through the valley, and then do it again. So especially where I started down in the San Juans, so the Durango side, there's tons of climbing initially. As you get closer and closer to Denver, it trends downhill as you head towards the city. So I didn't get to experience that part.
Yeah, and that's actually probably where, and I mean, probably you weren't thinking too much in your head at this point, or if you made it to that point, but where a shoe pick could come into play, just because those long downhills can just be like wrecking on your quads and hamstrings. So
yeah, for sure.
All right, moving on to the next question. How much does weight play a factor in ultra running, and do you track your own weight?
I do not track my own weight, so I don't know if I can speak to this question very intelligently, but I don't think weight plays that much into it. I think it depends on your body and your strengths and, where your muscle mass might be held. So no, I don't think weight plays into it that much, but
yeah,
I'm sure there's other opinions.
Right. I mean, there's always going to be opinions on, lighter is better or stronger is better, but over your time, I'm sure you've experienced competition, lots of different body types, and I mean, it probably depends a little bit on the race, but at the end of the day, there are so many different body types you see out on the trail. So yeah, I think I'm with you that it probably has something to do with the whole grand scheme of things. But at the end of the day, there's just so many different body types out there that can do well in the ultra. And probably at the end of the day, the mental aspect is one of the biggest parts.
Yeah, for sure. The mental aspect is huge, especially as those races get longer. But there's tons of variety in the body types and coming across those finish lines. And I think that's pretty cool about the sport.
Yeah. Moving on to the next question. This one kind of, I kept hearing during our last time talking, everyone was freaking out about like the potential that you would do the Barkley Marathon. So this question really stood out. It said, I was excited to hear you are interested in the Barkley Marathons. If you were to attempt it, how would you prepare?
Oh man. Well, first I'd have to figure out how to apply for it.
I think you need some flannel shirts, right? That's part of the...
Yeah. And I don't know what else, like a year's worth of fingernail clippings or something. I don't know what the weird thing is you have to send. But I would need to dedicate a lot of time to the map portion of the Barkley and figure out what that looks like and try and gain some knowledge on how to do that better. I would also focus a lot on vertical because, I follow some different runners who have done the Barkley, and the amount of time they spend just going up and down mountains or hills or whatever staircase they have available is huge. So I think learning from people who have done it or have at least attempted it would be important.
Yeah. I think that race it's gotten its name because of how crazy it is. And when people heard that you were even considering it, it got everyone excited. So, I think we're going to have to kind of wait and see where you end up on that whole topic. But I'm excited to see where it goes.
Well, thank you.
Final question. What's your worst ultramarathon fueling mishap? And this might be hard to just do in one response, but yeah.
No, I think I have one solid worst mishap. During an early on in my ultra running, like maybe year 3 or 4 or something, I was running next to someone who in the last 10 miles of a 50-mile race, they took a 5-hour energy and then they just took off. I didn't see them again. So naturally at my next race, which was 100 miles, I was like, I want to be like that person. I'm going to do 5-hour energies as my nutrition plan. So I took a 5-hour energy around, I don't know, like mile 40 or something. And I ran for a little bit afterwards and I didn't notice any amazing rocket fuel effects. So I figured that 5-hour energy must have been defective, and I took another one. And about 10 miles later down the trail, I was just laying in a fetal position, trying not to vomit on myself. And I spent like probably the next 4 hours trying to rebound from this terrible mishap because my stomach was so mad after 10-hour energy.
Oh man. And I just need to get the final story here. Had you tried a 5-hour energy before? Was this the first time you'd ever done it?
It was the first time.
Oh,
that guy
Courtney.
did it, so of course I could try it.
Oh man.
Well, and then a second one within, an hour, 30 minutes of it.
Oh man. Well, I think moving forward, the moral of that story is you got to try things before race day. Definitely don't want to do any wild cards on race day, but it sounds like you've learned your lesson. Well.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just got to try things for fun.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. Well, good. You came, Courtney. You answered all of our questions. I threw some pretty crazy ones your way, but I appreciate you sticking with for the ride. For people that want to keep following you, keep following this journey, I've been tracking all of this through your Instagram. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, thank you. You can find me on Instagram at Courtney Dauwalter, on Twitter at Court Dauwalter, and then on Facebook as Courtney Dauwalter.
Perfect. I look forward to seeing what the next adventure is. I know there's going to be something even crazier. I know the Salomon TV coming out. That's going to be super rad to see how this this whole trip that we've been talking about all kind of happened in person. So once again, thanks for joining us, and it was an honor to have you here with us for the second time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. We look forward to hopefully seeing you again in the future.
Perfect. Thank
Perfect.
you.
We'll see you.
See ya.